Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is JGOD. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the M4A1 assault rifle and talking about how to have the best class setup possible. I did one of these videos recently on the MP5 and it was very popular. A lot of people requested me to do the M4 and the Growl. I started off with the M4 because it's a pretty popular weapon. If you guys are interested in having that Growl video, try and get this video to 2,000 likes. Normally I do a 1,000 like goal, but I think you guys could hit that number. And the overall goal of this video is not for you to just copy my individual class setup, which I'll go ahead and give my individual preferences. It's to learn a little bit about the specific attachments so that when you go into a match, regardless if it's 6v6, 10v10, ground war, Warzone, plunder, you're going to be able to customize the class setup and understand what the individual attachments do so you can better make a best class setup for your individual preferences. So we're going to talk about a variety of attachments, the individual recoil patterns and how they're affected by individual attachments, a little bit about how I do my testing, the side-by-side range comparison and time to kill for this individual weapon in Warzone, and I'll go ahead and give you my personal preferences when it comes to class setup. So the first thing we're going to go ahead and talk about is the most popular attachment in my opinion when it comes to Warzone, and that is the monolithic suppressor. So the pros with the monolithic suppressor, the sound suppression, that's going to help to keep you off the minimap when you fire your weapon. And then on top of that, you get a little bit of damage range, which doesn't usually amount to much, especially when we're talking about the M4. That only equates to about 3 meters of distance when you have a 25-meter range for its initial range. In addition to that, you do have a little bit of penalties. The main one that you'll notice is the aim down sight speed, which is going to be 1 frame slower, and that's at 60 FPS. If you're wondering how we figure that part out, so here they are side by side within my editing software. I pretty much have them all start at the same time where all the crosshairs are pretty much standing still. What happens is as I progress forward, they're all going to end up fully aimed down sight. And there's actually 2 parts of aiming down sight. The main one we're looking at when we're comparing side by side is the overall background has stopped moving. Even if the weapon is still getting into place, the main thing you're going to be looking for is the difference in the background. As soon as that hits a point where it stops, that is the ADS speed, which you can see right here is 250 milliseconds for the M4 base weapon. So when it comes to the Corvus Custom, you can see that it's going to be 1 frame slower, which is around that 17 milliseconds. Same thing when we go to the M16 barrel with a 2 frame penalty. And that's pretty much how you have to do it manually. You go frame by frame and you're kind of looking at the overall milliseconds, doing the math, or even looking at the individual frames. So you can see it's at 17 frames, 16 frames, 15 frames. So 1 frame penalty, 2 frame penalty, and that's pretty much how that individual process works. Do the same thing with movement speed. So anytime we're talking about it's going to slow you down when we take these individual measurements. So right here you can see they're all starting at the same point. So when I bounce it a little bit further ahead, you can see the base one is going to be faster. The Corvus slows you down, and the difference between these is 1%. Whereas these between the base is only going to be 3 or 4%. And I want to show that part off because I think that's important in the process, that I'm not just making up these numbers. I'm literally testing all these things from when the game came out. So a lot of this stuff is 6 months old, and I've made some minor tweaks based off the different patch notes and updates that have happened over the time. Next up comes the barrels, and we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about the damage profiles on the barrel. The Corvus Custom is going to give you a 1 frame faster aim down sight than the M16 barrel. So if you value that 1 frame, you're going to go with the Corvus Custom. If you don't really care, you want a little bit more range because there's a 10% difference in range, you're going to go ahead and go with the M16 barrel, and there will be slightly less recoil with this barrel because it does have a little bit more recoil control. So that's kind of the difference between those two. We'll go ahead and look at the damage profile so you can kind of see the comparison and make the decision for yourself. The difference ends up being 3 meters in range and 1 frame difference in ADS speed. So it's really a matter of preference. Next up, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the different underbarrels. A lot of times, especially on the MP5 video, I went through each of these and how they affect the recoil, which we're going to check out right now. But one of the things that a lot of people ask me is, why didn't you use the tactical foregrip? Why didn't you show that off? This attachment is terrible. You should use this on none of your weapons. And the reason for that is because a lot of times people actually believe these bars that are on here where it says accuracy, damage, range, fire rate, all that, if you're trusting that to make your class setup, you're already lost because those are not accurate. If you're trusting those bars to make your class setup, you've already lost. You got to know specifically what the attachments do. Unfortunately, the developers who make the game do not make those accurate, and that's not our fault. That's 100% their fault. But if you get sucked into believing that those are accurate, you're going to make a terrible class setup. So right here, you can see the Commando foregrip is a great option if we're looking at those bars, and we go to the tactical. man, you get way more recoil control. But in reality, you did not, because it helps with aiming stabilization, which is primarily for when you aim down sight, you have a little bit of idle sway. It's going to reduce that, so it's a little bit less. Doesn't matter. Once you start firing, it's going to have still the same recoil, and that's what you're really trying to adjust for. Not that first shot accuracy. Getting on the target, usually pretty easy, but you get the recoil starts getting out of hand, you might as well have an attachment that's going to help you out with that. So we're going to take a look at all of these on the chart. And you're going to see them all side by side. In addition, we're going to also compare those to the granulated and the rubberized grip tape, which help with aiming stability and recoil control, and compare that also to the no stock attachment. So we're going to take a look at those now. So I made myself a little bit smaller so I don't block any of the screen, but these are the individual recoil patterns with just the weapon by itself and the one attachment I am talking about in the little descriptive here. So right here is the base M4 recoil. If you have no attachments on it, so no barrels, no monolithic suppressor, nothing. I fired 30 bullets. I did 2 of these spreads so you can have a side-by-side comparison. You can see it pretty much goes up and then diagonally to the right. Up and then diagonally to the right. And you can see that's not 100% identical. For the most part, they pretty much kind of line up if you overlap them. Same thing when we go to the commando foregrip, you can see it tightens up that horizontal recoil, which is what it's for. And you normally see that one titled as recoil stabilization, which is the side to side. So you can see that it's drastically cut down. You can see that this one goes towards a little bit on the edge of the two, and this one kind of stops a little bit before that. Obviously, it's not perfect comparison because maybe I started just a hair off, but you can kind of see it does tighten them up and it does give you reliable hits all the way across. Merc foregrip kind of gives you that bonus too. In addition to that, with the Merc, you're going to get improved hip fire accuracy, so that's a huge plus. We got the tactical that pretty much looks identical to the base, so you're not really getting much out of it. The main thing you're going to get with the tactical grip is you're going to get a consistent recoil pattern every time, but it's not going to actually decrease the magnitude, whether it's horizontal or vertical in any way. As you can see right here, it still goes to the edge of the door. It still goes just as high, and it still goes just as wide. So you're not really getting any benefit with the tactical foregrip. So do not trust those bars. We have the Ranger foregrip, which is actually a really nice grip. As you can see, it kind of cuts down significantly the vertical, and it does kind of help the horizontal a little bit. So this one ends up being a pretty nice grip. And a lot of times why people don't end up choosing some of these grips is because of the penalty you get to your ADS speed. With the commando foregrip, there's 0 penalty. With the Merc foregrip, you get about a half a frame to a frame penalty. Kind of hard to tell with 60 FPS. Tactical, 0 frame penalty, but obviously no benefit, so it's kind of a waste of an attachment when you can use plenty of other attachments that are going to help you out. Ranger foregrip, about a frame. We also have the operator foregrip, 2 frames, which is definitely slower. But as you can see right here on the screen, this is one of the tightest spreads that we've seen out of any of these recoil patterns. So definitely going to help you out with your aim. Going to be a laser beam once you get all those other attachments on there, but it will feel very slow. No stock, you can see it kind of increases that recoil a little bit, not significantly, and could be countered out by some of these other attachments that we're looking at, but I still want to include that one because it does have a recoil penalty at the benefit of a 2.5 to 3 frame faster aim down sight time, which is definitely noticeable. It's kind of like the opposite of the operator foregrip. So technically you could probably go operator foregrip if you combined it with no stock. So that could be a combination that you try. Rubberized grip tape. You can see that it does help on the recoil control, and then granulated, which pretty much doesn't look like it's doing much at all, which ends up being the same as the tactical. So you're going to want to avoid any of the ones that are aiming stability for the most part, just because it's not really going to help you with the real thing you're trying to solve for, which is recoil. So we covered a lot of those different things with that. Now let's go ahead and cover the tack laser. So the benefit of using a tack laser, it's going to give you 2 frame faster aim down sight, which can be used to counter maybe the operator foregrip if you want to go that route. The only difference is when you aim down sight, you're going to have that penalty of having that laser visible. So a lot of times you're not going to hard aim with this. If you really want to avoid that, you could always go the rear grip route of the stippled grip tape. And it's pretty much solving for the same thing that the tack laser is if you're using it for aim down sight speed, because it's going to be 2 frames faster. But when you go ahead and compare it to maybe some of the aiming stability, this is where maybe you get your aiming stability instead of using that tactical foregrip. So it's kind of one of those things. You kind of choose what works best for you. A lot of times I go with the tack laser over the stippled. So it's kind of one of those judgment calls you have to make. So when it comes to ammunition, the difference between the 50 and the 60 round mag is so negligible that it might as well go with the 60 round mag, especially if you're going to be playing Warzone, where this additional 10 bullets is going to allow you to down an additional player or thirst a player once they're already downed. When it comes to regular multiplayer, it might be worth it to go ahead and go with the 50 round mag, or maybe even stick with the 30 if you're playing 6v6, S&D or something. So it really is one of those things you're going to have to figure out for yourself. Now let's go ahead and talk about the overall range when it comes to those individual barrels. So pretty much what we're looking at here is a graph of time to kill, and this is in milliseconds, and that is against distance in meters. So pretty much 10, 20, 30, 40 meters all the way across, 500 all the way up to 1,000 milliseconds. The lower the number is, the better. You can see that there's a damage drop off for the blue, which is the base, right around 22.5 meters, 25 meters. It drops off, and then you can see if you had the Corvus plus the monolithic, it's going to drop off right around 30, 32.5 meters, drops off there. And then if you have the M16, you get about 2.5 meters a little bit further. And we have the same exact drop off right around that range. It drops off right around the 50 meter range. And you can see that you're really only getting a difference of 2.5 meters comparing those two different barrels. But obviously compared to the base, this is a huge jump in distance. So it's really one of those things you got to kind of figure out for yourself and how it plays into that recoil control and how it's going to work out with your individual preference, whether you want that extra 2.5 meters or you want that faster aim down sight time. So that should be enough information to pretty much make the best class setup you want to make for your specific play style and scenario. But I'm going to go ahead and show you my preference as far as the individual attachments go. I'm going to go with the monolithic suppressor, obvious reasons that I just talked about. M16 if I'm playing Warzone, but if I'm playing regular multiplayer, I typically go with that Corvus. And then I either go with the Commando foregrip or the Ranger. It kind of just depends on how I feel that day, but both are great options. And when I'm playing regular multiplayer, I go with the stipple grip tape. When I'm playing Warzone, I tend to go with the tack laser, and that ends up being my 5 attachment class setup for the M4. If you have other ones you recommend, make sure you comment those down below. But like I said, after you watch this video, you should have a good idea of which attachments to use when. Hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, please let me know by hitting that like button. If you're brand new, looking to find your way back for more Call of Duty content, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. We appreciate all the support on the channel. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.